The Spin-off Podcast Network.
This is Kiwi is back for a brand new season with more inspiring kōrero from special guests including rugby player, father and role model TJ Perenara.
My family bring me joy. Rugby brings me joy too, but it's not the same joy as my family brings me.
And global dancer and choreographer Kirsten Dodgen.
For some reason, people think I'm very intimidating.
Listen to the new season of This is Kiwi, brought to you by the Spin-off Podcast Network in collaboration with KiwiBank. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Nau mai, hoki mai ki other fold, e mihi nei, ko Duncan Greive toko ingoa. My guest today is Ant Timpson, who is a true legend of New Zealand film. Legend sort of makes it sound kind of a little bit fusty, a little bit like elite, and Ant is elite, but he's an elite weirdo, and he's a guy who's sort of bulldozed his way in from the outside, and has actually, in some ways, kind of not been able. A lot of his career, he was very intentionally not trying to get in. He was trying to build something new and messed up on the fringes of the thing. And probably the first time I was in an Ant Timpson environment, I had no idea who he was or his role in it. Like I remember as a teenager, taking acid and going to the 24-hour movie marathons at an incredibly strange film festival and just having a super weird, super great time. And a few years later, trying out at the 48-hour film festival and making some real terrible thing, but just having that sheer exhilaration of a group of people who didn't really even know each other that well, making something and starting out with nothing, and at the end of it, you've made a thing. And both those institutions, I think, are actually incredibly important for New Zealand, and they're very kind of products of his id. They don't really exist elsewhere, and I think they've had a profound impact on our culture. Ant's love of kind of B-grade, schlocky, kind of messed up splatter horror, freaky film, which is what a lot of Incredibly Strange was about, where he's regularly going to war with, family first type organizations, or getting censors terrified with what he's trying to put in front of the nation's youth. That's so formative to him. 48 Hours as a thing was like, this is DIY. This is basically punk filmmaking. Give it a go. And people like Taika Waititi and like legends have had their first kind of scratch in a situation like that. And from there he's produced films, and on some level that felt like his lane. But relatively recently and later in life than a lot of people would expect to do this, he's directed films. First, Come to Daddy, and most recently Bookworm, which went to the premiere of that film last night. And it's you can feel that Ant made it. There's a kid gets fed mushrooms, and there's a kidnapping that is just a notch scarier than I think you'd expect in a family movie. And Elijah Wood's character is just a beautifully drawn, scruffy freak. But it is also like this broad family film, and it's just been fun talking to him about how you kind of melded his sensibility with trying to make something that could play for a whole family, and why he went down that path. So talk about a bunch about that. Also, hopefully not too crotchety, despairingly, grumpy old menishly about the kind of evolving state of modern culture and of the film industry more specifically. Honestly, I had a ball doing this. I love talking to Ant. I do a lot of it. It's a joy in my life. I'm just such a huge fan of him as a person, and a really thoughtful, intelligent but challenging, like not doctrinaire type dude. You know, a big UFC fan, along with having this perfect kind of canon level knowledge of film. And yeah, so this is just a real fun chat. I've been wanting to do it for a long time. Glad that Bookworm, which is out today, please take your kids along to see it. It's a great time. But yeah, this is Timpson, director of Bookworm, on the Fold. Tinakwe and Timpson, welcome to the Fold.
Thank you for having me, Duncan.
This is a thrill. You know, I'm still kind of high off the premiere last night, which I was lucky enough to attend. And you know, like when I file a story that I've worked on from anywhere from 2 to 6 hours, I have a huge sense of elation and having accomplished something significant. So I can only imagine when you've worked on a film for literal years, getting to that moment last night where you're releasing it, surrounded by friends and family at your brother's theatre. It's a moment. How are you feeling now with that in the rear view?
It's look, to be honest, it's lucky we got the world premiere out of the way a little bit earlier. So that kind of anticipation and huge build up after such a long time, that was the release kind of over there. It was more of a safe space, heightened atmosphere, crazy audience. This was way more intimate, like a lot of friends and whānau, very closer to home. So kind of like the tensions were a little bit higher for me. And you lose perspective over the long journey of making a film. So it's kind of rewarding. There's a bit of imposter syndrome always, like hiding in the background, whispering. So premieres are weird because everyone's like, I love it. What else are they going to say? Yeah. I hate it. Like it's.
I have some notes. You got time? You got 10 minutes?
So it's a really a warm, loving atmosphere. I just keep seeing stuff that I'm not happy with in the film, but I love that. I love that people are digging it, and it seems genuine. They really seem to get into the film. It's playing like to a pretty wide demo, which, because my background's so ultra, very much outlier, quirky, culty, adult a lot of the time. So this is new terrain, new challenges, and it's good that you can bring that sensibility and immerse it into a more family-friendly structure, and it still kind of plays. I'm curious to talk about that because, you're if anything underselling just how kind of extreme and avant-garde a lot of your history has been in kind of super pulpy, super weird films, and then you're making something that is both broad in the sense of like its accessibility. It's like a PG family film, but there's still like a kid being fed mushrooms and a cat that is both like unreal and a little bit too extra real. Like it's still scary. Like you get that element. Like you can feel the kind of that lineage still in the product. Like, yeah. What was it that led you down the path of making something that was quite a sort of a sideways step for you? Well, I think you can have both of those things. I mean, it was a real wake up call last night, and there was a couple of kiddies that found it a little bit too intense. I don't know how young they were, but those are the kind of films that I grew up with, those sort of seminal moments that burn into your memory as those family movies that I saw in the 70s. There were moments in those films that had bite, and I feel like we've kind of lost that. We'd really make very safe, too safe in some ways, like the cotton wooling of our kids, the helicopter parenting. This film is a throwback to the sort of let the shackles off, as a kid in the 70s being feral, no sort of dominion over you, that sense of freedom. I feel like we've lost a little bit of that. So it's a hark back to that. In terms of, I just totally missed what the original question was, but it was...
well, I guess it was about kind of why
go back to that? Why go to that type of film?
Yeah.
It really was character-based first. It wasn't like, let's make a PG movie and let's challenge ourselves. It was more, ultimately it was like, Elijah's now become this avatar for Toby and I, the writer, to hang neuroses as men and parents on him. The whole dynamics of dysfunctional families we find humor in. We grew up with that type of cinema and television, and we just want to mine it all the time. So it was like, we know Elijah comes with an inherently massive amount of goodwill with audiences, just a supremely likable character in real life as well. So you can kind of hang like the most insufferable types of people on him. And Come to Daddy, it was like a wannabe, rich, entitled, white muso LA asshole, and it's like one of the most hated characters in the world, but we had the audience rooting for him. And in Bookworm, he's like a Chris Angel, washed up, terrible illusionist from Vegas, kind of people you wouldn't want to spend 2 minutes with, but he manages to like win the audience over. And then it's like, what's a good foil for him to emasculate him even more apart from just the plonking him in the deep south, put him next to this precocious kid who's like super highly intelligent, smarter than he is, more capable, and has a huge chip on his shoulder because he left her, right? Or has never been part of her life, and she's making him pay for it. So it's like, let's make a family film that has got a little bit of bite, a little bit of fun to it. Just the type of cinema that I don't see around anymore.
It's interesting though, right? Like this year, I mean, we just published a very positive review of We Were Dangerous. The Mountain came out a couple of months ago. All of them seem to, on some level, be harking back to a form of adolescence that contained danger and adventure, and that, as you just said, kind of seems to be kind of waning. And we're all. It's hard to be like, I'm not this kind of grouchy old. Is it just that I'm a grouchy old fogey and things have changed, or are we really missing something? Like, do you sort of sense that in those films and in this moment that there is a kind of, hang on, we kind of need to haul back a little bit of freedom?
It feels that way. It feels like there's a lot of coming of age of filmmakers who, and I just heard Jermaine and Taika talking about Time Bandits, and they were reiterating exactly the same pitch I'm doing, which is like, why don't we make things that just the whole family can check out, and there's no sort of like, parents suffering through watching a kid's film. But there's two, you're talking about the big kid at heart, the nostalgia vibe is huge at the moment. So then, things like Goonies were really pivotal films for a whole generation. And I think there's a longing for that type of film to connect again, where kind of low stakes in the big scheme of things, not a kitchen sink reality to it all. It's very different from the arrested adolescent type of cinema of the Deadpools and all that, which is kind of like, for me, it's like, there's an age group that you've got 50-year-old guys collecting toys and watching terrible from my point of view, just the kind of lame comic book movies. But there's a generation of people who aren't into that, who have kids, and it's like, where's their films in the cinema these days? I mean, televisions take up a lot of the oxygen and provided that, but film, it seems like there's a little bit of a turnaround, and nostalgia plays a huge part of it, and yeah.
It's interesting, right? Because there's been over the past 18, 24 months, notwithstanding the kind of general post-pandemic doldrums, that reliable superhero hit film just hasn't been nearly so kind of much of an ATM as it was for a period of time. And the kind of drums beating for are like, why are there no movies for me at the multiplex kind of thing has feels like it's risen. And do you think that in the sort of kind of sputtering of the kind of nonstop franchise machine that contains an opportunity to rebuild a more kind of diverse slate of cinema?
I mean, I want to say yes, but I don't think so. I think history has a nature of repeating itself. The success at the moment is Deadpool.
And Twisters, which is like both franchise, but also like, Twisters and Top Gun feel like a little bit in the vein of what you're talking about in a way.
Yeah, exactly. But they feel, complete reboots of 80s sort of, or 90s for Twisters.
And in terms of the fantastical feel, it's qualitatively different to the superhero stuff.
I mean, it's good and bad. I mean, it's just finding the headroom that you can put your head up above those massive monuments, and so we want people going back to the cinemas. Those are the ones that are driving everyone. You just want the trickle down effect to come into effect, but there's only so much. It's taking up. I think Deadpool's taking up 75% of screens. It's some crazy figure like that, and it's very hard. It's great that it gets this energy back into the cinema biz. The exhibitors are super happy. Disney's obviously super happy, but I don't know if it's going to change the playing field, and suddenly we're going to see budgets have to drop. We can't keep sustaining that type of filmmaking. You see these stories about Robert Downey making $100 million or whatever for this next sort of couple of Avengers films, and it's like, you just imagine taking a little bit of that, investing it into, a sustainable future of that kind of mid-range cinema that we've lost. The ones that were so formative for, like we were saying, Goonies and your Twister. Twister, I knew was going to be a massive hit. It just felt like it doesn't feel like a franchise film at all. It feels like that film kind of connected in a really sort of sleeper way and became a monster. And I just remember when my son was like, just came home, he was like jacked up about seeing the trailer. And it's so different from superheroes, even though it's big action and everything. It's like there was something very human about that, which is what our one is. It's like people in the environment, small scale. It's just the scope is bigger,
Did you find when you were trying to build out a sort of a budget and thinking about the sort of business side of getting a film like this made, with your background, but also with the fact that while it was a broad family film, it still had like tripping mushrooms and kidnappings and probably a bit more peril than maybe people were anticipating, and doing that at a really difficult kind of pandemic-y time. How was the sort of business side of putting this thing together?
I mean, we had fabulous producers on board. Firefly. I've worked with Emma. She was on board Come to Daddy. Emma Slade is a powerhouse at the moment, one of the best producers in the country. She's got a great team that's expanding. So hard to have a sustainable production company in this biz at any tier. So really exciting that she's making a big go of it. And so, Bookworm was put together like you have to get overseas offshore investment now. So the difference between the old days of New Zealand film is that we financed them solely out of New Zealand nearly. There were a couple of exceptions, but primarily that was how it was done. And then it suddenly got tougher. The market, the landscape changed. We had to get offshore investment in these things, which meant you needed films that had to play to a wider audience. We still have films that don't really sell that well around the world. They can do huge business here sometimes, and then they don't get sold offshore. So we were lucky that Bookworm, the family films, seem to have a pretty good runway around the world in terms of distribution. There's always a need for that type of cinema. It's kind of a staple. So same with horror films. There's certain types of genres that click with distributors and sales agents. So we felt pretty comfortable. We had a great investor who came down. He actually came down on set, which is usually terrifying when your investor turns up. But we chucked him in the movie as a background extra, and he seemed pretty happy with the results. So you got to find the money we can. Emma and Victoria Dabbs were great on the team, and Roxy Bull, 3 powerful wahine, did all the hard work for me. I just had to turn up and have fun with friends.
Do you, in terms of that, and it's weird just hearing you say that, like, family is a genre film now. Like, it's such a bleak reflection on where we are as a culture. Thinking about the sort of other side of it, once you've funded it and made it and you're trying to sell it, does the fact that you're outside of true genre, as in horror, where you've spent the bulk of your life, and you're actually in a family space, and in a period where like streaming is spending a lot less money, but you've probably got a more saleable product in some respects. Like, have you got a streaming outcome for it yet? Like or how predicated is that on its box office performance before you sort of flow into that realm? Yeah,
I mean, look, so you start at like a global streaming sale. That's your ultimate goal, is out of the gate when you make the film. You go, let's get that Netflix worldwide deal.
Yeah.
They used to be a lot more common. Nowadays, it's a lot tougher. They get broken down into territorial.
Even on Netflix, they do.
Yeah, so
right.
you could sell to Netflix ANZ, you can sell to Netflix UK, sometimes multiple territories.
And I guess then they get a peek at how it performs there before they put down a big check in a way that previously they wouldn't.
I'll give you an example. Okay, so
Sure.
Mr. Organ, we didn't sell to a streamer early on, like when we were trying to get the film out and about. And so it was only through doing the US release. I had really good friends who helped us out with a theatrical release for Mr. Organ. It got great press. David worked his ass off on the PR side of things. And we got the film visible. And suddenly Netflix, who said no in the past, turned around and said, okay, we'll take it. So things can change. So if you don't get that global sale, then you just go through the normal distribution channels, which is territory by territory. And so Bookworm had pre-sold to a lot of territories anyway, which took the heat off a little bit. And then, so we've sold to all the big guns, the US, UK, France, Russia, Canada, the whole shebang. So then those distributors will organise the sales to the streamers and the pay one deals. They'll handle all that. So it'll pop up everywhere. I mean, ANZ you have to have a distributor on board before you even get start the whole machine. So it's going to be widely available. The cool thing about Bookworm this time for me is that it's all going to happen relatively quickly. Last time Come to Daddy was like world premiere, then a whole year before we even got it out in terms of in New Zealand, and then it just took ages. And so this time it's going to be a very short window from woe to go.
What's driving that sort of velocity?
The New Zealand release happening really quickly. Like, the last time the Come to Daddy played, it was so accepted into festivals, it played non-stop in 60 plus or something, crazy amount of film festivals. And then it just kept building and building and building, and people let that roll. This time we had a hard lock NZ date, and so that forced everything to be compacted, which sort of just put a poker up or the distributors to a line and hustle fast to make sure, because once it's out to digital here, the piracy's everywhere. The film is it's going to kill everything. Not always, but it doesn't help. If they see it on Pirate Bay and they haven't even released their film in their market theatrically, it's like, it's not going to help.
So is piracy still? It's so weird to me because I used to be once we were pirates. We're in the pre-Netflix, like when it often felt like the only way you could get the thing. Since then, I've become quite sanctimonious about my pay for your culture. So to the point where I haven't really thought about it, but it is still prevalent within film and can feel like it has a material impact on its prospects.
It's perception, I guess. I mean, they feel it does. I mean, personally,
this is the streamers, or
just the distributors in those territories. It's not ideal. I mean, the classic example is the Liam Neeson film Taken, right, which leaked really early before the US theatrical. Turned out it was a monster hit theatrical in the US after it had been out for 8 months on torrents. So it's hard to make the argument that it was affected. In fact, it might have actually boosted the awareness.
Yeah, because that was, love Taken.
Yeah.
But it's on some of that's also a genre of film. It's ultra violent. It's quite, like you wouldn't have picked it to be the hit it became. So in some ways you go like, did that create a buzz around it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I used to be like the big flag waving, like all piracy's evil, you guys suck. But those people aren't going anyway. All they can do is say if they love it, there's a chance that they'll probably go to the cinema to see it again with friends or tell the people it's excellent.
In the actual economy,
yeah,
who might buy a ticket.
The cream rises, man, like it does. So it's like, but if you have junk, it's not going to help either way. You're going to find a tough road ahead. But, good films find their audience. That's what I've learned over the years.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I kōrero with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBit.
That's a good opportunity to talk about a piece that you wrote a long time ago, and we've discussed kind of around it for a while now about, your whole, like a lot of your kind of creative professional life has been around hunting down culture and sweating and scrapping to get it onto a big screen for an audience that has trusted some of your, institutions like Incredibly Strange to kind of, put something cool and weird and kind of shocking and maybe haunting up there. And, and I had a similar relationship to music where there were records that just sat in my mind and I was like, I have to find this thing. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but eventually I'll get to hear that noise. And I think for both of us, that sense that culture is a few clicks and well-written search strings away at all times has really dulled that sensation personally. And it does feel like globally, and you wrote this, I think quite prescient piece for Birth, Death Movies on the subject. Do you want to kind of give us that thesis and tell me how you think it's aged?
Yeah, I used a lot of terrible food analogies in that piece as well, but it was at its core, it was about, the cluttered nature of everything being available at once and the loss of the hunt. And I equated it to quasi-simian desires, like this very primal need to seek out and hunt things that we needed, that we had a hunger for. When everything's available to you, you have the largest spread in the world that you can just reach out to everything. You'll just reach for the comfort things, right? Or the things you're not going to. There's no need to search when you can just reach and grab it. So. The anticipation, the desire is lacking in a way. And it sounds completely elitist, but the gatekeeping nature that used to exist where it was curatorial and there was a trusted network, I feel like people just now are like doom scrolling on Netflix or wherever it is, TikTok, just constantly doom scrolling through things, never sort of being satiated, never being fulfilled because it's all there, it's constant. There's no break. It's just constant. I just feel like you need to make there's a real need for it sounds horrible again, exclusivity or hard to find or
curation as well, because that's the thing, like you have everything looks the same on Netflix, like you can have like the worst kind of most cynical, not in a good way, not that cynicism is always bad, but just like a shit movie right next to like a masterpiece, and they all have the same kind of, the algorithm determines the best like pack shot effectively, and there's nothing that kind of says this thing will blow your mind and change your life, and this thing is stealing from your last available minutes, and that the algorithmic curation and the kind of superabundance, but also like amazing things just being missing forever in some respects. Just there's like a paradoxical abundance and also a narrowing of what people will ever actually likely seek out. That just feels.
It's weird that they haven't. They want to control the algorithm. They don't realize that maybe there is kind of like what Letterboxd is doing, where you have trusted sources and you follow, and then it's like the recommendation kind of vibe. Where it's not like Netflix goes, these are your closest sources. These are people I trust.
Yeah.
Like if you could follow filmmakers on those streamers and they were like, this is like Scorsese, what he's just watched. I mean, they do articles and they sometimes post about things that they're doing, but if it was tied into a network that you could control, and it's not this amorphous entity that is all about the bottom line, that there is a kind of creative desire and a sort of ambitious quality to it, that it's not just all about making bucks. Of course, that's how it's called show business for a reason, but it's like, can we have a little bit more control? I just feel like there's an apathy that's really pervasive at the moment in terms of all culture. It feels like it's become, and it feels like a dinosaur talking about this stuff, because it was so meaningful to me growing up, like how important film used to be. Now it's not as important as it is to generations now, and it's, I struggle with my kids sometimes and like what they're consuming and what they're watching, but it's so heartening to see. I never wanted them to be mini-me's, so it's really cool when they discover things that I think, oh, man, that's actually kind of great that they're getting into that. They got it by themselves. I didn't shove it down their face. So that aspect of discovery still exists. It's just that there's just an overwhelming amount of meh That's what the kids could. Do they still say that? I don't know. Mid, maybe. Is that what you?
Yeah, I think both those things they still work. Anyway, it's just us here. I don't know. It's interesting, right? But I also think that I was talking to one of our my colleagues, Lyric, who I think you know as well, ex staff, used to work with your wife Rebecca, and who's like reading In Cold Blood and watching The Sopranos, and I do think there's also a kind of sometimes you just wake up and go, this vertical video thing, it's giving me nothing, and I want to grab something real, something kind of substantial, and because that, and I wonder if what feels like it's just this kind of permanent algorithmic kind of hellscape narrowing is actually just a kind of we're early. It's a relatively kind of, it's a way station, and or if not Netflix, then some kind of new thin layer of curatorial relationships to the sort of various libraries that exist. There'll be an incentive to make something that feels quite different, quite curated. And if Netflix is network TV, then some kind of weird, freaky cable will rise in its place. Again, is that wishful? It is wishful.
I mean, the scary thing is that the loss of access to a lot of the stuff, which is kind of I find kind of exciting as well, because people thought digital landscape is going to change everything. Everything's permanent. It's always going to be available. That's not true.
That's right.
You can buy iTunes subscriptions to you think you purchase something, then the licensing deal changes. It suddenly disappears from your library without your knowledge. Like, the physical aspect of everything's coming back in a big way, just like vinyl made a resurgence. There's now a physical kind of explosion happening. The kids around the world are discovering how cool actual analog cinema is. They're going to see 70mm presentations, not just because it's a cool thing to do, but I just think there's an interest into like looking back as well. And it's part of all the nostalgia But yeah, there are hopeful, there's glimpses that I get encouraged by that, I meet them at the Hollywood, we have 35 screenings there, and people who discover that cinema for the first time, that aspect of seeing a film, and a lot of it is back catalogue stuff, and very cool programming. So that curatorial thing is still going to exist. It's just that I feel like for the masses, it's always the same. They just it's herding sheep into that mass consumption. That is not going to change. But there are glimpses that there's small windows of exciting things happening. But let's not go into the AI side of things, because that's another whole show.
Thinking about 48 Hours, which is probably a good pulse check on how, because you have to be a kind of insane, ideally young, to submit to that, which is this baby of yours that is sort of enduring without you having to be as deeply involved anymore, but you must still be very aware of it. And we had a bunch of people from our company doing it, and that seems to happen every year. What's the kind of pulse check there? And do you sort of see that there is kind of cause for creative hope, even if the sort of financial distribution piece remains
problematic?
Pretty rough?
Yeah. First and foremost, I think just having a creative outlet for a lot of people is absolutely healthy in terms of just being present in the world today with what's going on. I feel like the industry itself can't sustain thousands of directors coming through the biz. There's just not enough work. We need to build up the sort of skilled crew side of things a little bit below the line. There's a lot of areas where there's people who are interested in that. Everyone wants to be obviously above the line a lot of the time, but there's work out there. There's a need out there for specialist areas in film. So it's kind of like 48's just an introduction for people to learn a lot of aspects of the business really relatively quickly. But ultimately, I think it's just about doing something that doesn't feel like it feels like a good creation, being satisfied that you get to see something really quickly, like you've created. It's like it's not like writing a book. It's not a huge amount of time. It's a weekend, and you end up with something very physical that you can share with people, and hopefully get something emotionally rewarding out of it. Apart from that, it's proven to be a really good pathway. We've watched a lot of people come through this pipeline and end up in the business, starting production companies, working together, making great TV, making great films. It's just we can't. The business it's a cottage industry at its best here. The numbers just don't work in terms of everyone who wants to make a career out of it. And those ones, the scrappiest, the hardest, the hustling, the bit of luck as well, are the ones that are going to break through. But if you don't show that you can create, whether there's money or not, you're going to get left behind. And so that's why the rise of the YouTube, the rise of all these other people from other areas are starting to invade, because they're doing it every single day and they're getting really, really good. I'm blown away by some of the stuff, even though it's easy to say, oh, that's all garbage, all that stuff. It's not. There's some incredible stuff coming on there. I'm completely impressed. Vertical nature aside, it's encouraging to see that there is some innovative, groundbreaking stuff. I was just watching something in the car before coming here, waiting to kill some time, and it was this guy who's got his whole Instagram feed is just these incredible little horror scenarios that he does. And they're just magically, beautifully succinct, non-dialogue, just pure atmosphere, very experimental. And I was like, yeah, man, this is, and I just felt a little bit of hope. Like, yeah, there's still areas that are shining.
That's kind of the paradox of it, right? Is like, and that's why it's so hard to kind of characterize this era or this platform or anything as all one thing, because they, as much as there is this kind of dominant archetypal, like deadening presence in the culture, there's always someone who's kind of hot wiring it to make something else, which honestly feels like kind of what you did for a lot of your life with Incredibly Strange and so on. Was like, yeah, here's these institutions, I'm going to make something, we're going to run 24 hours here and we're going to put stuff on screen that it feels like this whole country has been working really hard to not put on a screen.
Well, you know what I tell you, there was a lack of asking for permission. I think my dad had a bit of it. There's a bit of a anti-authority streak that runs in me. You can ask my teachers from grammar. It's always been, and I feel like don't ask for permission. You know, I feel like that's a big. I think that's something that you should embrace in this day and age when it feels like overregulated, controlled. It's too hard, too many hoops. Break some rules and
make use of the fact that there are these very accessible kind of tools to kind of just ram raid in, rather than if you go through the established pathways. You know, I feel like that they can almost like you to sort of stay in your spot in the queue.
Yeah, and your voice is the strongest weapon you have, right? I mean, it's a cliche, absolutely, and that's what's terrifying about AI, because there's no voice. It's just white noise and stolen white noise. Generative AI, forget all the useful AI tools and all that. That's the worrying aspect of it. So,
but I mean, I don't know a single person who's like, except for technologists who are involved in it, who's like, I enjoy watching predominantly unfiltered AI-made productions, because I think we all have this kind of slightly queasy reaction to it. That's not to say that generative AI doesn't have amazing use cases, but I think the sort of the super large, we put everything in it models. Yes, you're dead right that there's a kind of a moral case there, which exists in a lot of technology, to be honest, but also because they draw on so much, they don't. There's nothing sort of original or kind of surprising that ever spits out of it in my recent experience.
But also the people making these decisions, then
they're the opposite of creative people.
Yeah, and it's honestly, it's like, you know, Hollywood kills itself over and over by making terrible decisions. I mean, in terms of like the way that the streaming landscape is now eating itself. Massive like greed-focused things, no big picture, no like where's the end game. The end game of AI is not a good end game at all on any level that you look at it.
No, but equally, someone's greedy, kind of short-sighted decision to someone else's business opportunity.
Here we go.
Thanks so much for coming up, Anne. I mean, we're very good friends off mic, but it's been really, really fun to talk about the film, which I loved, but also the vagaries of this kind of maddening, incredible industry as well.
I know. I wish I was more articulate in certain aspects of it, but
please.
I feel it's such a crazy wild west at the moment in terms of all culture. It's an exciting time.
Yeah, in some ways, like there's part of me that feels like as much as I have regular moments of despair about the thing, particularly about what the financial incentives are, culture is this kind of renegade beast, and typically, historically, when feels like it's at its most imperiled, that's when a really cool kind of counter cycle can kick off, and maybe we're starting to come into view of that. Who knows?
Chaos theory, baby.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ant.
Thank you for having me.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, Senior Writer at The Spinoff. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spinoff Podcast Network.